Hi Maureen, thanks for tagging me in your post to take a look at your essay. I understand that you're aiming for band 7, so I'll take a look and see if I can find anything that might be limiting your score to prevent you from getting this. Alright, we'll start with the question. Some people claim that not enough of the waste from homes is recycled. They say that the only way to increase recycling is for governments to make it a legal requirement. To what extent do you think laws are needed to make people recycle more of their waste? In essence, this is really to what extent do you agree or disagree, because laws are needed means governments make it a legal requirement. Okay, so it's an agree or disagree question. I did take a look at the comments and I did read Muhammad's comment, and I tend to more or less agree with what he's saying. You forgot the most crucial part of the question, which is the part where they say the only way. You need to agree or disagree with whether or not the implementation of a law is the only way to increase recycling culture, but you somewhat agreed to something else in the intro as far as I can see. Yeah, I think I more or less agree with what he's saying. You can read into your essay as you having answered the question about whether or not you think laws are needed. In a roundabout way, you are saying that you think that they are needed to a certain extent, because you did say that they would definitely make people recycle more, but you didn't state it clearly that that they are indeed needed. It's necessary. You're more or less saying that it's a good thing to have. And that's how I think a lot of people could read into it. You really need to answer it a little bit more directly. Okay, so that's why I tend to agree with that comment. Alright, so let's move on. Managing waste has become a significant problem for many governments over the years. It is argued by some that in order to recycle more, authorities should implement laws for it. I somewhat agree to this statement. You don't agree to something, you agree with something. You can agree to something, but it's like you're agreeing to do something. Okay, so I'll agree to your request, for example. So in this case, you're agreeing with an opinion. I think to motivate homeowners to take. Okay, so you've got a new sentence here. That's an important error here. That's a basic mistake with punctuation, because you're starting a new sentence here. This is probably the most fundamental rule of English punctuation. You always end a sentence with a full stop. I think to motivate homeowners to take action and implement recycling in their houses, rules could be applied. I'd pause after houses, and therefore I put a comma after the prepositional phrase in this case, especially in this one because it's quite long. Okay, so you want to pause at the end of it so that the reader can process that chunk of language before they move on to the next chunk. Rules could be applied. In addition to these laws, again, you've got a comma here where there should be a full stop, all right? And that should be capital I because it's a new sentence. In addition to these laws, different awareness campaigns can be created as well. To begin with, okay, so let's talk a little bit about your introduction. That's good that you've responded to the question. That's really important. You have to have a clear position throughout the response, and the simplest way to do that is to include your response to the opinion in the introduction. So you've done that. Whether or not it's directly responding to the question is, as we talked about already, something that could be debated, could be applied. Should be applied would perhaps fix the issue. If you said could be, it's implying that you're suggesting that it's a good idea rather than needed. If you say should, it would solve that issue. To begin with, much of the home waste is made up of recyclable products that can be easily recycled if people tried harder. If people tried harder, it seems like you're suggesting that people aren't trying hard enough, so no one's recycling. You could replace that with, I think what you do mean is when they put in the effort to do so. At homes, this process starts with sorting different waste products, but this needs motivation. You could expand on that point. Why does it need motivation? For example, you could mention that the reason for the extra effort involved is that people need to install separate rubbish bins in their kitchens, for example, or they need to take multiple bags of rubbish to the collection points outside their homes. Or they need to take one big bag of rubbish and sort it at the collection points in their homes, whichever one you want to mention. But at least I'd say extend that point that people need motivation. Hence, if legally required, that's a conditional phrase, which is subordinate clause, so you need a comma. People will definitely recycle more. For example, in Toronto, they have separate recycling bins where all the items specified are sorted into. If, in case, recycled materials are mixed with other waste products, you don't really need a comma here. And also, I'd say, without the if, in case, and I'd put a space between in and case. So, in case recycled materials are mixed with other waste products, that whole clause here then becomes the subordinate clause. The law enforcement gives out tickets and penalties. Gives out sounds a little colloquial. I'd replace that with the more formal alternative, issues. Issues, tickets and penalties. And if you use the word issues, it demonstrates awareness of collocations. To avoid these penalties, people try to adhere to the given rules. Thus, this encourages okay, so the word thus is like therefore. You need a comma. This encourages residents to use these bins correctly. Yeah, so like I said, in a roundabout way, you have responded to that opinion, but not as directly as I think you should to get a higher score in task response. Because you're really saying that it's a good idea. It's not so much that it's necessary or needed. Let's move on. However, there should be a comma here. However, laws can motivate people to a certain extent. You've misspelt the word extent. And be careful with that one because that's actually given to you in the question. So you've misspelt a word that they've provided you. To what extent do you think laws are necessary, for example? I know what you're trying to do here. You're contrasting this idea with the subsequent idea that you will describe in this paragraph. And to do that, you really need a negative adverbial, or negative adverb here, only. Can only motivate people to a certain extent, or can motivate people only to a certain extent. Okay, whichever one you prefer. Empowering them with knowledge about the consequences of not enough recycling can have a desired effect which can last longer. What do you mean can last longer? I don't understand this part. In my mind, if you implement some laws, then those laws could be effective indefinitely, and I don't think anything could last longer than that. Laws, I think, maintain their effectiveness as long as the penalties are kept in line with inflation. So I don't really understand what you mean by can last longer. Public awareness campaigns, and when I underline something, for example, when I don't really understand it, that's an opportunity for you to extend your answer. And that's how you would really score a band 8 or 9 in task response, because the reader can really understand in depth your points, each point that you're raising, because you've extended them either with explanations or with examples, whichever one you think is appropriate. Public awareness campaigns where they are given the data of the amount of waste which goes into landfills and that can be recycled if can be equally effective. This sentence doesn't really make sense. It's structurally incorrect. You could probably fix it by deleting that if. Public awareness campaigns where they are given the data of the amount of waste which goes into landfills and that can be recycled can be... Alright, so if you do it the way I've done it here, delete the if, then this from here to here becomes your subject of the sentence. That very long noun phrase. And then the verb is can be, and then equally effective. Alright, so you've got the noun phrase and then the predicate. So now it's structurally correct, although it's top heavy. Or if you diagram that sentence with a tree diagram, it would be left branching rather than right branching. And right branching sentence structures are easier to process for the reader, easier to parse, P-A-R-S-E. But the one you've got is the opposite, so it's more difficult. There are many responsible countries all over the world where people recycle, reuse, and take care of their surroundings out of obligation towards saving the environment. Out of obligation. What kind of obligation? I know what you mean here, because you said towards saving the environment, but to make it clear, or clearer, I'd say write what you mean, which is a moral obligation, out of a moral obligation towards saving the environment. By the way, there are many responsible countries all over the world. You could add some examples here, again, to extend your answer. Just 1 or 2 examples, where people don't have laws and yet most of their citizens recycle. I can't think of any, but I'd like to know, are there any countries where this happens? Yeah, I think you really need to give an example to strengthen this part of your argument. Because in a sense, what you've done overall is implied that laws, yes, they are helpful, but they are not the only way. I think that's how most people would read into your essay. And you really need to strengthen that part of your essay by giving clear examples where countries don't have laws and yet they are able to recycle most of their waste products. Okay, to conclude, although laws are mandatory to facilitate residents towards recycling, the word facilitate, I wouldn't use that. Ensure. Okay. Facilitate is something that you would use to indicate that it helps people, assists people, but laws are not there to help people. They're there to ensure that people abide by them. To ensure residents, okay, so ensure, you don't towards something. Ensure residents recycle, okay, E, and can play a significant role. Okay, so you start with although. They are not absolute and with other, okay, they are not absolute and with other. All right, there's a compound sentence here, so you need this comma before the conjunction and with other measures like awareness programs, even more people can start recycling. They are not absolute. That is a little vague. And the word absolute doesn't clearly indicate whether it's necessary. It's not really a synonym for that. So I think you need to rephrase that. Just replace it with something like, they are not absolutely necessary. and then you would be more clearly answering the question. So yeah, there's a few issues with task response. You could extend your answers a little bit more, clarify some of the points, and the most important thing is to clearly respond to that point in the question, that they are needed. Without that, you might not have responded adequately to the question to score what you're aiming for, a band 7. And I'll just go through quickly the other areas of the band descriptors. I won't score this essay. I can't score a practice essay as such, so I'll just take a look and see if there are any other points that would limit your score, possibly limit your score. So the next one would be coherence and cohesion. With coherence and cohesion, you have a range of connectives, although I wouldn't use to begin with up here. I'd just delete it. For coherence and cohesion, you really need to have a clear introductory sentence. And in this one, you haven't got that, I think. So really, this paragraph needs that point about motivation to come a lot earlier. The second body paragraph starts with however, so that's good. So it flows easily. I can follow this essay quite easily. I don't think coherence and cohesion is a major issue in this essay. Apart from the first body paragraph, I think that needs to really come to the main point sooner. For grammatical range and accuracy, this is really something that I think that you would be prevented from achieving your target score from. I think that your punctuation will stop you from scoring a band 7. You really need to tighten up your punctuation. You've made some really basic mistakes with punctuation. And people tend to forget that grammatical range and accuracy includes punctuation. I'm going to show you the band descriptors again and focus in on punctuation. Okay, so band 9, 8, and 7 produces frequent error-free sentences. Band 6 makes some errors in grammar and punctuation, but they may rarely reduce communication. I'd say that applies to your essay. Alright, so we'll go on to lexical resource now, and you really need to show a range of less common words and collocations included in that. To start with, I'd say recyclable. That's less common because you've changed the word recycle, the verb, which is well known, very common, to the adjective recyclable. Shows that you know how to use this word in different forms, and despite the fact that it's a tautology with easily recycled. What else have we got? Okay, law enforcement. I think that's less common. And penalties, no. Laws can motivate people to a certain extent. That would count against your lexical resource, but it's only one instance of a spelling mistake. So let's call that a one-off or a slip in this case. Empowering, yes, definitely. Empowering is less common. Consequences, no, that's not less common. And public awareness campaigns, there you go. So you've got a 3-word compound noun. I think that's less common. Landfills, you've got landfills. And, okay, what else have you got? Out of obligation. In a way, that's a collocational phrase, out of obligation. 2 prepositions before a noun. And to conclude, laws are mandatory. No, that's not really less common. Yeah, you've got a few less common words and phrases, so it's not, I wouldn't call that your limiting factor in this essay. So just wrapping up, I'd focus on task response, make sure that you clearly answer the question, and make sure that you have a clear topic sentence in each body paragraph. So get to the main point sooner than you have, for example, in the first body paragraph. And of course, fix your punctuation. I think that's definitely your limiting factor. And it probably will be in any of your other essays until you learn how to use punctuation correctly. All right, so I'll leave it with you. If you have any questions, just leave me a comment and I'll respond when I can. Thanks. Bye.